Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really fascinating look at the language of software development.
Yeah, specifically the vocabulary we use to describe modern engineering. It's a surprisingly contentious topic.
It is, because for years, Agile has relied on these fun metaphors, tribes, sprints, trains.
Things that made it all feel very approachable, and
Yeah.
it worked. It helped these ideas spread.
Exactly. But here's the conflict, and this is what our sources are all getting at, that playful language has created this huge disconnect, a gap between how we talk about software and how serious the work actually is.
Right. So our mission today is really to unpack this argument that when you have teams building, say, hospital systems or payment platforms or even rail networks, critical infrastructure, yeah. The language of play is actually harmful. It hides risk. It kind of weakens the professional identity. So we're going to explore this call to bring back some seriousness and, frankly, engineering discipline.
The stakes are just so high now. So what message does it really send when an 80-person unit managing, core financial code is called a tribe? That's the question we need to keep in mind.
And to start, you have to realize just how deep this vocabulary runs. It's everywhere once you start looking.
Oh, it's baked into the biggest frameworks. And when you list them out, they all seem to lean on either like fantasy or recreation.
Precisely. You've got the Spotify model, which is hugely influential, and its core structures are tribes, squads, and guilds.
It sounds like a video game or a
It's-
fantasy novel, not a $100 million project.
And then you've got SAFe, the big one for large-scale stuff. It's all built around release trains.
Right, with a conductor and solution trains. It's all about movement, which I get is appealing, but it sort of distracts you from the actual architecture, doesn't it?
It does. And we can't forget Scrum itself, the sprint, which just sounds like this frantic, unsustainable burst of energy.
And the burn down charts,
No.
and the classic pig and chicken story.
The barnyard animals, yes. As if we need a fable to understand who's accountable for the work.
And that's before you even get to the coaching culture, with things like pizza games or ballpoint games or calling your best developer a ninja.
Look, the intent obviously was good. It was to make complex new processes feel engaging, to lower that barrier to entry.
But the side effect, this unintended consequence, is that it just subtly trivializes the work.
That's the key. It makes the entire profession seem less serious, especially to people outside that bubble. To stakeholders, to executives. They hear squad and they think.
How seriously can they be taking risk management?
Exactly. When you have strategic programs worth millions managing life or death systems and you call them release trains, it just implies software as a playground. And well, it's disrespectful to the engineers doing incredibly serious work.
Okay, but hold on. I have to push back a little here. Isn't this all just semantics? I mean, if a squad is a high-performing team that delivers, who cares what they're called?
That's a fair challenge.
Maybe the playful name actually helps build a stronger internal culture, a bit of fun to survive the corporate bureaucracy.
And a lot of companies would argue that it's for internal bonding. But the sources push back hard on this. They argue that your culture shouldn't be built on professional obfuscation. Clarity and seriousness should be what drives the cohesion.
Not the other way around.
Right. Because when an investor or a regulator or a hospital administrator hears these terms, they don't see team bonding. They see a lack of rigor, and that immediately makes them question the predictability of the system.
So clarity trumps internal comfort, at least when the stakes are high.
Every single time.
Okay, that makes sense. So if we throw out all this playful language, what should we be focusing on? What does that professional, serious language even sound like?
Well, we need to anchor it in the core concepts of all engineering disciplines. Think about how a civil engineer talks. They don't talk about sprints or tribes.
Right. So what's the software equivalent?
It's focusing on architecture and design integrity. It's not just what you build, but how you build it to be resilient. It's about rigorous risk management and compliance.
Means with real gravity.
Yeah, and focusing on predictability, on measurable quality assurance. The language has to reflect systems thinking and professional judgment.
I could see how that just completely changes the conversation.
Yeah.
If you walk into a board meeting and say, we had a problem with squad alignment, it sounds like a personnel issue.
A soft problem.
Yeah. But if you say, We had a failure in our dependency structures that compromise system integrity. That's a whole different level of conversation. It's about governance. It's strategic risk.
Exactly. You can't talk about a multi-million-dollar compliance program using words that came from a team-building game. The language has to match the stakes.
But again, let me be the skeptic. Are we just swapping fun jargon for stuffy corporate jargon? If I'm an engineer, is it really better to say the domain model interface failed instead of just the back end blew up?
And that's a great point. This isn't about killing everyday shop talk. It's about replacing the organizational metaphors with analytical engineering terms. The alternatives aren't just jargon for jargon's sake. They're precise tools for problem solving.
Okay, so let's get into those alternatives. What are some of the frameworks or practices that are already using this kind of serious professional language?
You see it most clearly where reliability is just. It's non-negotiable. So look at lean-derived approaches. The language there is all about measurable concepts. Flow, finding constraints, doing root cause analysis.
Eliminating waste, defining value.
Yes, it's all built on data, on observation. It sounds more like a production line.
Which I guess a software pipeline is. It's a world away from gaming metaphors.
It is, because it respects that software development is a production system. And you see the same thing in practices like DevOps and asset reliability engineering or SRE.
The terms are things like observability, reliability engineering, incident response.
And the metrics they use are incredibly powerful. They're not vague. They use SLO service level objectives to define what reliability actually means to a customer.
Not just the site is up.
Exactly. They measure MTTR, mean time to resolution, to quantify how fast they recover. And critically, they use error budgets.
An error budget is a perfect example of this. It turns failure into a predictable, financially understood resource. It's not a surprise anymore.
It's a managed risk. And finally, you have the foundational language of architecture. Things like design integrity, clear interfaces, domain models, dependency structures. This is language that any engineer, whether they build bridges or microchips, would recognize.
The key takeaway seems to be that these approaches respect the profession instead of, infantilizing it.
That's it.
Okay, now we have to hit the big objection. A lot of people will argue that this playful naming, this squad and tribe stuff, it creates a looser environment that you need for innovation and creativity.
This is maybe the biggest myth, and the sources really tackle it head-on. They basically refute the idea that the name of your team has anything to do with how innovative you are.
So if it's not the fun names, what are the actual drivers of creativity in an engineering context?
The real drivers are structural. They're tangible. Innovation comes from having protected time to experiment, from real psychological safety, not just posters on a wall.
From getting engineers direct access to customers.
Yes, and deep cross-disciplinary collaboration. And maybe most importantly,
management support.
Management support that provides protected innovation capacity, time and resources that don't just vanish the second a deadline gets tight. Great teams innovate because their environment supports structured exploration, not because they have a cool name.
That's a great distinction. We don't need an innovation playground, which sounds chaotic. We need intentional experimentation that's actually planned for and backed by leadership.
Absolutely. The rigor of SRE, for example, actually drives innovation because it forces you to automate routine work, which frees up brain power for new problems. That is structural innovation.
So this all leads to a pretty clear call to action then, for both the engineers on the ground and the leader setting the tone.
It does. If you're an engineer, the advice is to, push back on these cartoonish metaphors. Ask for a real engineering role, not a Scrum Master Ninja.
And demand that conversations are about architecture, risk, flow.
Exactly. Embrace mature practices. And for the leaders, the message is just as clear. Stop using childish names just because a framework is easier to sell internally.
Use language that your engineers and your executives can both respect.
Frame changes in terms of real engineering outcomes, like reducing MTTR or improving value flow, not fantasy metaphors. Your operating model should be as serious as the systems you're building.
And this whole conversation, it really boils down to a massive context shift, doesn't it? I mean, we have to remember, Agile started in an era of small web startups.
Simple architectures, informal teams. That was 20 years ago.
And today, the software being built is national infrastructure. It's patient safety, it's global finance. The complexity and the stakes have just exploded.
And our language has to change to reflect that critical weight. We have to treat software engineering as the serious, safety-critical discipline it now is.
That's a powerful way to put it. The call isn't to reject structure, but to adopt a structure and a language that actually respects the profession. Developers or engineers, they deserve to be treated that way.
Indeed. It's about shifting the foundation from just fun and fast to disciplined and reliable.
So here's a final thought for you to take away from this deep dive. Think about the most complex software system you rely on every single day. Maybe it's your city's transportation network, your bank, your hospital's record system.
Something critical.
Something critical. Now ask yourself, if you found out that systems team was described using gaming terms like squads on a release train, what specific risks or predictability concerns would that raise in your mind about the safety and stability of that system?
Something to ponder as you navigate a world that's literally being held together by disciplined code.
We'll catch you next time for the deep dive.